can't win it, but if everybody else loses, then they can win it.
Could you vote for them, Michael?
No, I think Penn State's the best team.
But I suppose Penn State loses, Auburn.
Oh, would I vote? Yeah, sure I would.
And you, Mitch?
I've been saying on this program that they're the #1 team in the country before they beat Florida
I
yesterday.
hope you've been picking someone else on other programs.
But you don't argue with perfection, and these guys are perfect. But I don't think that they can win the national championship because there's too many gyrations and paperwork and jumping over. If they're not #1 when the poll comes out today and sit there for the rest of the way, plus, as John said, to win national championship, you're supposed to be in both polls. You don't even show up in one. I don't know how you're going to win a national
Which raises, to me, a larger question here. Obviously, I think that if you're going to let a team play, then you have to let them be eligible for the national championship. This idea that the coaches pretend that the 3 teams on probation, Texas A&M, Washington, and Auburn, who are ranked in the top 10, don't exist is ridiculous. But if the NCAA is ever going to get serious about stopping cheating, which they won't, what you do is you say when you go on probation, you don't play. You're out of here, and that.
But there's the national championship thing is a poll thing, and the problem is you have so many different parties here. You have writers and coaches voting on polls. You have the NCAA deciding who's legal and what's not legal. So they shouldn't be in the polls at all. If you really want to take probation to its final limit, and that's the problem with this whole thing, which is what a playoff, what a playoff would eliminate.
Don't you appreciate the fact that the coaches can't vote on a team that's on probation, but usually you end up on probation for things coaches do?
Yeah. But let's take our own poll. Which was the better game yesterday? Those 2 great games.
Auburn, Florida with 4 lead changes in the 4th quarter, and that finish with Patrick Nix making that play on 4th down. I mean, the wonderful thing about college football is so much changed in 3 plays and 21 seconds at the end of that game. They're beat. You know, they're down 4 points. They're on the 42-yard line. Hits the 4th down, hits another one, throws the ball up. Frankie Sanders catches it, and you know the shockwaves go all the way through the top 10.
And Michigan was
the other game.
Michigan was a bigger stretch of the same theme, back and forth.
Only
it was the first half, second half, and people are going to talk about that 4th quarter and those last couple of plays by Michigan, and there was some questionable play calling there. But that game was won in the 1st quarter. Penn State has this tendency to come right out and wham, you're down 15, 17 points, and it took all Michigan had to get back into the game, not enough
which was Tyrone Wheatley that put them back, who put them back in the game.
And should have had the ball more in that final drive.
One tradition has held at Michigan, even though Schembechler has left and Moeller stay, it is still the home office for questionable play calling at the end of games, isn't it?
They're always good enough. They're always good enough at Michigan to not win the national championship.
Yeah.
And yesterday was another example. But let's give Penn State.
Wait.
Oh, come on, you don't have to defend Michigan all the time.
In defense of Michigan, they play on the Penn State. So you can talk about Duke,
yeah,
right? I thought that's why John was here, as a matter of fact. No, they're scheduled a lot of times. It's kept them out of a national championship. But no, they're on the track to the Rose Bowl all the time, and a lot of time it's kept them out. They've always often had one game for a national championship against Notre Dame, and that's often the case. They won that game this year. Let's not rip them.
And Notre Dame's having a hell of a season. They really are.
Ever since that spiral downward.
The quarterbacking in the game yesterday. Cousins,
tremendous.
Cousins, brothers, relatives.
Well, there were about 100 Collinses in the whole game because Penn State has 5 or 6. They are very, very poised. Both of those guys looked like NFL quarterbacks playing college football, and it was wonderful to see because it's not just running.
Paterno took a Penn State linebacker who's built like one and made him into a quarterback. That was a terrific to come back after the kind of punches that Wheatley threw at them in the second half and stand up and take the ball down the field the way they did. And Penn State, I must say, got the great benefit of a terrible call because that sure looked like a fumble.
It was the same fumble that was in there in the first half. But we learned something about Penn State that we didn't know up till yesterday, that they can play in a close game, a tough game, fall behind, and come back and win.
And on the road.
Well, and I think that's an important point to make. And Penn State, the last couple of years, when they've gotten in against the big guys, has fallen apart. And for all the criticism of Penn State going into the Big Ten, and I think there's still a lot of questions about it, clearly what it's done is it's revitalized Paterno, it's revitalized his recruiting, and it's revitalized the program.
Back to the other game. Obviously, what cost Auburn the game, I mean, what cost Florida the game was the 6 turnovers, 5 interceptions, and a fumble. I thought your friend Spurrier stood up very well at the end where he took the blame for all the interceptions.
Well, yeah, he did, and I thought that was very gracious of him. But if he called that long pass on 3rd down that Auburn intercepted to start their last
he says he did.
Well,
then
then he should have been taking the blame because it's a dumb call. I mean, they don't need to make a 1st down there. I mean, if they make one, with a run, then that's fine. make them either burn a timeout, run some more time off the clock, kick the ball down, and then try to win the game that way.
Not only do I agree with you, but Spurrier probably does.
Well, and this was the year that Florida, supposedly, the difference was that they had a defense. And so you've got, Michael's right, you've got to make them go 70, 75 yards. And if they do, fine, all credit to them. But you don't throw the ball up there. You got to run the clock, make them burn. They only had 2 timeouts left. Make them burn one of those timeouts.
See, I don't think they would have burned one
yards.
there. I think they
then
would
they've
have
got under a minute when they get the ball.
Am I the only one who's fascinated by the fact that 3 teams on probation are 18-1 and combined in the course of this season?
Cheating works, Mitch. It's always worked.
Cheating pays in college football.
It does pay. On the other hand, you should have at least a morsel of sympathy for a coach like Terry Bowden, who he didn't commit the crime. He has not lost a game yet, and he still can't play for a national
How about another college coach? Any sympathy right now for Raleigh Massimino?
Yeah, I feel sympathy for Raleigh
his
Massimino.
1.8 million?
Absolutely. Well,
my heart's breaking for him.
No, see, that's not the point. I mean, all these coaches have lots and lots of money. Rowley, in 1985, won a national championship. This is a guy who paid his dues as a high school coach, as an assistant coach for years and years, and then all of a sudden he explodes into the national consciousness. Now, did he handle it perfectly? No. Would I have handled it? Would any of us handle it perfectly? I'm inclined to think no.
John, he took a secret contract. What
Wait
do
a
you
minute,
expect?
John.
I'm working my way up to that.
How about the deal with the Nets a few years ago where he, did a do-over on a contract with the New Jersey Nets?
He screwed that up, okay? He screwed up taking the secret contract. There's no question about that. But this is an outstanding coach who ran a great program at Villanova, and he's leaving the game in disgrace, and I think that's
Wasn't he incredibly naive to expect it to be any other way?
He thought he was going to ride into Vegas on a white horse, turn the program around, win games, have kids who graduate, and you can't do that at Vegas. The fact that they're going back to Tim Gergerich, who comes out of the Tarkanian program, is proof that they don't even want to try.
This is like when we talk about baseball owners who get into the system and then they say, wow, you can lose a lot of money. Where did he think he was going? You know, what? Did he think he was going to the Vatican of college basketball? Going to
No,
Vegas?
he thought he was going to turn it around.
Let me ask Mitch another basketball question. Glenn Robinson wants a $100 million contract. The owner of the Milwaukee Bucks has suggested that he'll take the contract and he'll give
this
Glenn
guy
Robinson.
Is my hero now.
Should Glenn accept that offer and take the team?
No, because Glenn might not be able to run it as well as this guy who's showing some fiscal responsibility. Herb Cole, who's a senator. I didn't know senators had this much sense, actually. And he said, take it because it's not worth it. On paper, it's $75 million. Someone has to say no to these guys. Now, if Robinson wants to sit out for a whole year and then come back another year later and say, well, now I want my $100 million, maybe he'll sit out long enough that $100 million won't be worth that much. But until then, I think he's doing the right thing.
One last point. Doesn't Anthony Hardaway have the most misnomer nickname in the history of sports?
Penny. Yeah. Dollar Hardaway.
Coming up next, Deion Sanders marches into Atlanta after this.
The Sports Reporters is brought to you by Mopar, Chrysler Corporation Parts in the Chrysler Plymouth, Dodge Truck, Jeep, and Eagle dealers who sell and install them.
The National Football Conference offers 2 great matchups today. Philadelphia against Dallas for first place in the East, and Deion against Andre for first place in the West. Can the Eagles and the Falcons fly? Are they threats to these 2 teams they're playing that have won half of the last 10 Super Bowls, Mitch?
I think very much so. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta wins that game down there. I think San Francisco is not the team of its legacy. And I like Philadelphia. I like their defense. I like their attitude. They're a classic case of a team that lost players and actually got better in a certain way because the locker room chemistry apparently has moved into Kotite's corner and away from the old Buddy Ryan mentality. And he's got them playing well. And I don't know why this guy isn't mentioned more as a good coach.
That is exactly right. This guy's a terrific coach. He's constantly living with the Jimmy Johnson rumors in Philadelphia. And look at Richie Kotite's record when he has his team. And I thought 8-8 with the bombs that fell on his team last year was an amazing coaching performance, and he's finally starting to get the respect he deserves. But I do think that this will be one of those Sundays that come up every month or so for the Cowboys when they get themselves jacked up for a game and play great today.
Isn't Kotite a better coach when he has Cunningham?
Oh, who isn't? I mean, you're a better coach with Cunningham,
Well,
but they're 21-7 under Kotite, Michael. You're right. Well, when Cunningham has been healthy and respectable even without him. And I think that you're absolutely correct that How about Buddy Ryan? I mean, this guy is the ultimate blowhard. He took Joe Bugle, had built a pretty good team in Arizona. Buddy Ryan has totally taken that apart. And Kotite's gone in, and when he's had a healthy team, he's won, and he's won as many playoff games as Buddy Ryan.
Buddy Ryan has gone further on sound bites than a lot of network TV people, because that's why he was basically hired in Phoenix to sell some tickets, and that's why they miss him in Philadelphia. Because why does Richie Kotite have to put up with Philadelphia's press bashing this guy because he's dull?
Yeah,
well, that shouldn't be the big but that shouldn't be the biggest crime on the planet.
Buddy's line when he got to Arizona, there's a winter in town, it's going to be like the football equivalent of read my lips for George Bush.
By the way, to be fair to the 49ers, I mean, they are beat up, especially on the offensive line, and they're in a mode now where if they can, I think their bye is coming up in 3 weeks, and they're hoping to get there. If they can somehow get out of Atlanta with a win today and get to the bye and get healthy, I think they can be a factor the second half of the season.
What about the remarks that are coming out of Atlanta? Obviously, there was some resentment of Deion, which seemed to be covered up pretty well when he was there. When he was there, everybody was supportive of him. But certainly, Ryson doesn't sound that way right now.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, I can't believe that anybody on the Falcons who wants to win and get to whatever the next level is for a team like the Falcons wouldn't want him on their football team. So what Andre Rison's remarks are not exactly
well, let's not
meaningful
forget he left 2 teams in Atlanta. Okay, he left the Braves and he left the Falcons as well. And I think Rison has kind of become Deion Sanders there. He's become the loudmouth. He's making the predictions and all the rest of it. But everybody would love to have the guy back.
Deion didn't leave the Braves. They left him. They traded him.
Yeah.
But I think Deion is a classic example of a guy who, when he's your teammate, you love him. He's a good teammate. I remember when I was doing the baseball book that the Braves really spoke very highly of him, and I think they meant it then. But when he goes to the other team and he's your opponent, you hate him back.
I observed something when the 49ers played the Lions last week, and we had talked about this. You know, there's all this, well, Deion's going to change the 49ers over. He is worth it. You know what? That's what television highlights do, because we only see 3 or 4 plays from every game, and Deion is usually worth at least 3 or 4 plays. But watching him over the course of the game, a defensive back is not going to turn a team around by himself. There are just too many ways not to throw to him. You go to the opposite side of the field, and he's not that big a factor.
Nobody said he was going to turn the 49ers.
Oh, I heard that.
No, that is not true at all. That he might be the missing piece and an impact player on defense who could take them past the Cowboys. Nobody said he was going to make. Nobody here said that.
No, I'm not talking here. I'm talking on a national scale. There are a lot of people who said this is the catalyst, that boom, they're going to get past Dallas. I'm not sure, after watching him for the course of a whole game, if he makes that much of a difference.
I think people were saying that with the other pieces they tried to put in place.
Well, then that's a fair comment.
He was the last piece.
I'll tell you what. We've talked about Deion today. We talked about the Falcons, but one thing you have to say is you look over the landscape of sports right now with so many mediocre teams and so many overpaid people. It's great to have the Dallas Cowboys in sports, because even when they're being trashy, they're the most interesting thing going in sports.
God, he loves the Cowboys and he loves the Bills. Coming up next,
Cowboys.
Stan Humphrey heads home to Louisiana.
Get online with the sports reporters. Get the inside story in advance. Subscribe to ESPN Net on Prodigy. 1-800-ESPN-PRO.
The San Diego Chargers are in a strange position today. They're playing a football game that almost everybody expects them to win, including themselves. Will success spoil San Diego, Mike?
I'm not ready to put them in the Super Bowl yet, because eventually they'll have to play my Bills. But
and then your Cowboys.
Bobby Beathard has shown that he is one of those handful of people in sports who can go into a distressed situation, as they had in San Diego, and won a mediocre situation for a long time, and quickly, relatively quickly. They were in the playoffs 2 years ago and looked like they might go a long way. He's a terrific football guy, and if he puts this team back in the Super Bowl, I would have to say that you have to put him up with the legendary front office people in pro football.
John, when he brought Stan Humphries to Washington, did anybody know that Stan Humphries was going to be anywhere like this?
Everybody knew that Stan Humphries was a talent, and he was a guy who they were looking at, and who knew about Rippon. And then Rippon has the great year in '91, and Stan Humphries doesn't want to live in Washington during the offseason, and Joe Gibbs, Mr. Control Freak, says if you can't live in Washington, we're going to get rid of you. And I think the point about Beathard is interesting because I don't think it's a coincidence that he leaves Washington, and over a period of 4 or 5 years, their personnel goes down. He didn't get a whole lot of credit for what their teams did 81 to 91. Gibbs got the bulk of that credit. He leaves. Gibbs gets out when the getting's good, when the team's over the hill.
Not only that, but Beathard built a, you know how in basketball there's like Eastern, in the NBA, there's Eastern basketball and there's Western basketball. Well, look, Beathard kind of built an NFC East team out in the AFC West. And it's interesting the way that they're playing because that's not traditional, the style of that particular division. And I love the way they play. And I think they do have a real good shot of going to the Super Bowl.
I was there the other day. I was out at their practice, and Junior Seau wears shirts that say on the shirts, "Say ow," O-W. O-W.
Well, this guy is a
typical
phenom.
college graduate. He can't spell very well.
This guy is a great talent.
He's a good guy.
He will smack
I got to
you.
tell you,
Yes,
the
he
most
will.
interesting thing out there, the most interesting player on the team is Mark Say. Mark Say, 2 months ago, was a 27-year-old former minor league baseball player who had never caught a pass in the NFL. He had a bullet lodged in his body, a kidney missing, and now he's caught 20 passes for 4 touchdowns so far this season. I mean, it's just an absolutely amazing story.
Do they have
Say
I was going to say the headline writers must have a field day with say
But also, he also is a legitimate hero. I mean, he got this bullet in his body, throwing himself in front of his 3-year-old niece to protect her
Hey,
during a...
they're fun to watch, and I hope that I just hope that there's a way that they can continue to wear the greatest uniforms in football.
And to paraphrase O.A. Bum Phillips, though, in the AFC at least, the road to the Super Bowl goes through Buffalo, and that'll be the key.
That just warms the cockles of Michael's heart.
I know.
We'll take
Said that for
one
him.
more break.
Hotel accommodations provided by the New York Marriott Marquis, located on Broadway and featuring the view, New York's only revolving rooftop restaurant and lounge.
Time for our parting shots, and John Feinstein fires first.
Thanks, Dick. You know, if you're looking for heroes in sports in 1994, you may not have a lot of luck. For the most part, our lasting memories of this year will focus on baseball not finishing, hockey not starting, and everyone in sports screaming for more money. Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan, a criminal and a crybaby, symbolize what 1994 has been all about. Then again, there's Paul Azinger. At the peak of his powers as a golfer, he found out he had cancer. He got to play in exactly 4 PGA tournaments and made 1 cut all year. For the first time since 1986, he didn't win on tour. Did he say, why?